As I was about to leave the conference room, Emily suddenly exclaimed softly. Her eyes were fixed straight on me. While other employees were still around, Emily opened her mouth as if she had made up her mind. "Mr. Turner, do you have any time available during your stay in the US?" Faced with her imploring look, I was taken aback, but her earnest gaze made me instinctively nod. "My name is Adam Turner, 42 years old. I work in IT. Today, I am traveling by plane. I wonder how she's doing right now. Every time I board a plane, I always remember a child. 22 years ago, I had been accepted to a university in Japan and was on a plane to move there. A girl, about 10 years old, was sitting next to me, and next to her, a man who seemed to be her father, was struggling to put her to sleep. It's really hard to sleep on planes, isn't it?" While empathizing with the girl who couldn't sleep, I spent my time reading a book. Eventually, I started hearing the girl's snores, and her father seemed relieved and fell asleep as well. Although I was too excited and hopeful about the new world to feel sleepy, I put on an eye mask to at least rest my eyes. Just then, I heard the sound of sniffles from next to me. Quietly, I took off my eye mask and looked next to me to see the girl silently crying. I was surprised and whispered to her, "What's wrong?" Since everyone else was asleep, I asked her in a hushed tone. "I'm scared," the girl answered in a low voice. "Scared of what?" I asked gently. "My brother's surgery." Upon further inquiry, I learned that her brother was undergoing a major operation in Japan, and she was traveling to Japan to be with him. I'd hate for my brother to be gone. This kind-hearted girl was anxious about the possibility of losing her brother if the surgery did not succeed, and this had made it impossible for her to sleep. I tried to offer words of encouragement, but they didn't seem to stop her tears. That's it. I got an idea and rummaged through my bag. Then, I pulled out a small game console. "Do you like games?" I asked quietly, and the girl nodded, so I placed the game console in her hands. "Try playing this." She began operating the game console with a look of bewilderment. In fact, this game console was one I had made myself. Ever since middle school, I had dreamed of being involved in game development, and during high school, as I was exploring my career path, a university in Japan became an option. While studying for the entrance exams, I made this small game console. Now, the girl was playing on the very first portable game console I had built from parts. It was a very simple shooting game, but she became absorbed in playing it. It seemed to make her tears recede. Since it was simple, she was able to complete it quickly. When she completed it, she turned the screen towards me with a satisfied smile. "What does it say here?" she asked, and I leaned in to look. My name, Adam Turner." In general, when you complete a game, the names of the staff who worked on it scroll across the screen. I mimicked that and programmed it to display my name when completed. But now that I showed it to the girl again, I felt a bit embarrassed. I found myself blushing slightly. "Adam, is your name Adam?" I blushed a bit again. At this point, I just went with it. "Yay, sounds strong, right? It can even beat your brother's illness." I waved my fists around to show her. The girl watched my gesture, and her eyes lit up. "Really, can it cure his illness?" Her voice was a bit loud, and her father, who had been sleeping next to her, woke up. The father was surprised to see his daughter awake and felt embarrassed that I had been entertaining her, repeating his thanks several times. "It's okay, I was getting bored too." Embarrassed about having woken up, the father readjusted the blanket over his daughter, urging her to go back to sleep quickly. Maybe the gaming made her a bit sleepy, her eyes grew heavy, and soon she fell asleep. Hours later, she woke up and played with my game again. I was glad to see her so engrossed. Just as the announcement came that the plane was preparing to land, the father nudged the girl, who reluctantly tried to give the game back to me. But I shook my head. "It's fine. Keep it." The father tried to refuse, but the girl looked a bit happy. Her adorable face made me smile. That was the first game I ever made. I'm glad she enjoyed it so much, so please keep it. I said this to the father, then turned to the girl. "When your brother gets better, play this game together, okay?" With a smile, she nodded vigorously. "Thank you." Her sparkling smile gave me courage. This is why I make things that can captivate people. For this, I'll study hard. With such determination and hope in my heart, I parted from the girl and landed in Japan. It seems I've been lost in memory for quite a while. An announcement that we were about to land came over the intercom. I wonder how she's doing now. I don't know the outcome of her brother's surgery, but hopefully, he's still living well today. With these farts, I disembarked from the plane. I headed for the company at my destination, transferring from train to taxi and safely arriving. As I entered and looked around the lobby, "Oh, excuse me. Are you the subcontractor?" a voice called out. I turned to see a young man in his 30s looking at me with a smile. "Yes." As I responded with a startled voice, the man hurriedly explained. "I'm so sorry. I tried contacting you several times but couldn't get through. I have an urgent meeting now. If we could reschedule our meeting to another day, it would really help me out. I'm really sorry, especially since it's our first meeting." Apparently, this man who kept apologizing had mistaken me for someone else. I was puzzled, but just as I was about to correct him. "Hey, Kevin," a woman's voice echoed in the lobby. Then, the man in front of me looked up and turned around. It seems this man was Kevin. "I told you I absolutely have to be at today's meeting." As she approached, the woman was using crutches. Despite the cast on her left leg, she skillfully moved forward with determination. She looked at Kevin with an expression of anger, yet she was incredibly beautiful. Her eyes were wide and double-lidded, with long eyelashes. Her well-shaped eyebrows formed a beautiful arch, adding to her exotic aura. While I was still in shock, a quarrel had already started between Kevin and this woman. "Emily, you just had an accident, right? I told you to take the day off. I can explain everything since I was involved too." The woman, apparently named Emily, retorted. "It's just a fracture. I said I would crawl if I had to. I was the main developer. I absolutely want to present it myself. Kevin, you go ahead with the subcontractor meeting as planned." Saying this, Emily looked at me, her eyes widening as she realized who I was, and started to panic despite her crutches. "Mr. Turner, are you here? I apologize." I quickly responded. No, you're on crutches? Please, take it easy. Are you all right?" Though I was flustered, Emily shook her head and said, "Thank you for your concern. I'm fine." Then she glared sharply at Kevin. "What are you doing? Greet him. He's Mr. Turner, president from the Japan headquarters." Upon hearing this, Kevin panicked and exclaimed, "What? Mr. Turner from the headquarters? I apologize," and turned to me to apologize. "You didn't know his face. You can't be serious." Emily muttered to Kevin in a low voice. I chuckled. "Don't worry about it. It's only my second time visiting the American branch, and I don't show my face often, so it's natural not to recognize me. But Emily, you seem well informed." When I mentioned this, Emily quickly looked up. "Yes, I've read every interview from start to finish and have been looking forward to meeting you today. You started a company with Vice President Aita Suzuki in Japan, and after your game app hit it big, you set up this American branch." Emily explained my background with sparkling enthusiasm. As Emily mentioned, I had founded an IT company in Japan with Arata, whom I became close to during my university days. We developed several apps and software, and as we continued to grow, one of our games became a hit. Noticing the high number of downloads in the US, aita and I decided to establish an American branch a few years ago. Emily, who knew my background so well, must be a talented employee. I was involved in the interviews when setting up the American branch, but I don't recall Emily and Kevin. After the setup, I entrusted all HR matters to the HR department here. Probably, Emily joined us mid-career, but I was pleased that such a dedicated employee had joined us. It's a bit embarrassing but also very gratifying. Thank you. Are you participating in the competition later? I'm looking forward to it, I said as I prepared to leave, but then paused. Kevin, was it? Even if urgent matters come up, try not to rudely change the plans of subcontractors. They are important people involved in our app development. I said this gently with a smile, trying not to apply too much pressure. Kevin turned pale, so I quickly added, I'm not angry. Personally, I don't feel too important. I maintain a fairly friendly dialogue with the staff, much like aita, who appointed me president. At the Japan headquarters, there isn't a strong sense of hierarchy. Especially since neither aita nor I believe in the absolute authority of superiors, our company culture in Japan is relatively lenient. I wanted the American branch to have good communication as well, but it tends to become rigid. I left the scene with a smile, trying to mediate the situation. At the subsequent meeting, I was in for a surprise. The American branch was hosting a competition to develop a new game app. All the entries were interesting, but Emily's app was outstanding. I reviewed her profile and found out she had joined just a year ago. Although her previous job was also in IT and details were confidential due to non-disclosure agreements, her skills were proven, and she had a high internal rating within her first year. Unsurprisingly, her app was unanimously chosen as the winner of the competition. We held several meetings, including with Emily, to finalize the details, and then the meeting adjourned. As I was about to leave the conference room, Emily suddenly exclaimed, Several of us turned at Emily's cry. Her eyes were directly fixed on me. She seemed to struggle with her words, trembling slightly, so I approached her. Amid other employees, Emily opened her mouth as if gathering all her courage. Mr. Turner, do you have any time during your stay in the US? Faced with her pleading gaze, I felt bewildered. I'd really like to discuss various things with you, Mr. Turner. Could you possibly spare some time for me? Standing there on crutches, shaking, I hastened to respond. Some employees murmured that it was inappropriate, but was it really? Of course, I'd definitely like to hear more from such an excellent employee like you. My schedule is packed, but how about tomorrow night? We could celebrate your victory in the competition as well. As I said this, Emily's cheeks flushed. I felt like I had seen that expression somewhere before. Unable to recall immediately and having other appointments, I exchanged contact information with Emily and headed to my next destination. The next day, to celebrate, I reserved a private room at a Mexican restaurant. Taking Emily's crutches into account, I made sure to arrange for an easily accessible seat. It had been a while since I last enjoyed Mexican foods. Probably, I was more excited than Emily. Sitting down with a nervous look, Emily placed something on the table before even opening the menu. What? I was taken aback when I saw the object. It was the small game console I had made from parts, the first one I ever crafted in my life. Could it be? As I spoke with a trembling voice, tears welled up in Emily's eyes. I finally found you. My name is Emily, the girl you gave this game to on the airplane. You're Adam, right? Like a broken doll, I nodded vigorously. Emily said, "Thank you for that time. My brother's surgery was successful, and he's still doing well." her eyes brimming with tears as she smiled. Emily had cherished the game console ever since, often remembering me. As a kind brother, she probably remembered me more fondly than I deserve. Inspired at that moment by the fact that I could create a game from scratch, she decided to pursue a similar path. She studied programming and joined an IT company, working relentlessly. On a whim, she searched for my name on the internet, which she had tucked away in her memory. The search hit on my name as the president of an IT company in Japan, receiving interviews. Adam Turner. The name that appeared when she completed the small game. The photo in the interview article matched the face she vaguely remembered. Then she learned about the establishment of the American branch. Since the mid-career hiring was open, I quickly prepared my resume, scheduled an appointment, and got interviewed. Emily said with a charming smile. As just another employee, she thought she'd never catch the eye of the president of the headquarters. So, she worked furiously. Then, she heard about the competition. Knowing that the president from the headquarters would be visiting, Emily poured all her efforts into developing the app. It was very well done, so, you did it for me. You should have sent an email, I said with a smile. Emily made a face as if the idea were preposterous. Me, send an email to the president of the headquarters? I wouldn't dare. And yet here I am, asking for a dinner like this. Emily bashfully looked down. I thought about improving communication within the American branch. As I pondered, Emily nervously looked up at me. I might as well say it while I'm at it. I've always had a crush on you, Mr. Turner. Ever since I was little. This little game console gave me courage. It was nice to know that she admired me, but I was surprised that her feelings had developed into a romantic interest. So, if you are currently unattached, would you consider dating me? I found myself a bit troubled. I'm sorry, I did think of you when I got on the plane yesterday, but it was more like wondering if you're doing well, or remembering you fondly. It's not the same as the feelings you have for me. I tried to choose my words carefully, but they didn't quite fit right. Besides, you're quite a bit younger than me. I'm an old man, and it might not be a good match. 8 years. As I stuttered and scratched my head, Emily interjected. Back then, I was just a 10-year-old child, but now I'm 34, and there's only an 8-year age gap between us. It's not that significant. Indeed, when put that way, it might just be 8 years. However, as I still hesitated, Emily looked at me pleadingly. If you're not seeing anyone, could we at least give it a try? Will you give me a chance? It was a long-held affection. Perhaps it wouldn't hurt to respond. Yet, I am a plain man who has become the president of a Japanese company but has almost no experience with women. She has idealized the kind brother from the plane too much. She doesn't really know the real me. What if she were to find out and say, "You're not what I expected"? That would hurt me too. How pathetic. I thought to myself, but this is just the way I am after 42 years, and there's nothing I can do about it. Let's start by keeping in touch then. I'll be going back to Japan the day after tomorrow, and won't be in America for a while. With the time difference, we might not be able to communicate much. During that time, if you feel that the real me is different from the ideal you have, I hope you can gently distance yourself. When I proposed this rather pitiful compromise, Emily burst into tears of joy. I regretted just a little being so kind to her on that plane. I felt guilty for having bound her to me for so long. Months passed. Contrary to my expectations that she would give up soon, Emily kept in frequent contact. Our text exchanges were sporadic due to the time difference, but there was no blame. When our schedules aligned, we switched to video calls. I'm not a fan of video calls, even for work. I don't like seeing my own face on the screen, even if it's just a small image. Yet, Emily always says handsome when she sees my face. Every time she says it, I feel embarrassed but also genuinely pleased. If I look tired, she notices even through the screen and tries to end the call early to let me rest, saying cute things like, "I'll send you some energy." Talking to her isn't very tiring, and despite being 8 years younger, we get along well. Gradually, I started to like her. I was slowly falling for her sincere affection. I became desperate to see her. 3 months later, I visited America again. I arrived at night, but Emily came to meet me at the airport. We had dinner together at a restaurant inside the airport, then strolled around a bit. Desperate to touch her, I nervously reached out and took Emily's hand. She was surprised but then squeezed back firmly. My heart pounded wildly. Feeling restless but determined, I led Emily to an observation deck I had researched beforehand, where we could watch airplanes. She came with me, sniggling close. The observation deck was chilly and nearing closing time, so it was sparsely populated. We sat down side by side and watched the planes. "Mr. Turner, ever since I met you on that plane, I've loved airplanes." She still calls me Mr. Turner. We're not in a relationship, so she makes a point of not mentioning my name. Initially, I felt reassured by that distance, but eventually, I started craving more and felt unsatisfied just being called Mr. Turner. I apologized for something I'd been thinking about for a long time. "I'm sorry. It's my fault for being kind to you back then, Emily. You've been trapped by me ever since." As I said this, Emily hurriedly tried to argue. I stopped her. "Unless I let go of these feelings, I can't move forward." After realizing how long I'd been holding you back, I was nearly crushed by guilt. I underestimated the feelings of a 10-year-old girl. Emily muttered, looking down. "It was all my doing. I just fell for you on my own. Just a slightly precocious girl." Her murmur made me smile a bit. "As a form of atonement, I've created an app," I said, sending the file to her email address. "Would you try it out?" Emily nodded and launched the app. There it was, a nostalgic shooting game. It was the first shooting game I ever made. Emily had been disappointed that the old console no longer worked. So, I revived it as an app. Emily easily completed the game with a few taps. I thought it would be a bit more challenging, she said with a smile, but I looked down. "What's wrong?" she asked, and I replied without looking up. "Just keep looking at the screen, please." After saying that, a small sigh could be heard. I could tell that Emily caught her breath. She must have been captivated by what was now displayed on the app. I did something rather cheesy for me. The screen Emily is looking at right now, it should be displaying, "I've decided to come back to America. Will you go out with me? Adam Turner." This message should be appearing along with an image of a bouquet. I had always wanted to return to America. When downloads of our games increased in the US, I proposed setting up a US branch. Aita had noticed my secret desire. When I told Aita about the status of the US branch, he suggested, "How about you as the head of the US branch?" It was an offer I couldn't refuse, and with a wink, Aita said, "You've always wanted to come back, haven't you?" Eventually, the decision was made to appoint Aita as president of the Japanese headquarters and a US branch president, who was fluent in Japanese, as vice president. This was to be announced tomorrow. After presumably reading the message, Emily shook me vigorously, and I reluctantly looked up. The message had already disappeared from the app. "How about it?" I asked, my face flushed, and Emily hugged me tightly. "I'm so happy. Really happy. Really, are you coming back to America? Will you go out with me?" She had loved me since we were children, and knowing the real me, she was still this happy. It brought me to tears. I wrapped my arms around her back and hugged her tightly. Yes. Sorry for making you wait. Thanks for loving me all these years. I'll definitely make you happy. I'll make up for the 22 years and fill them with happiness. Trembling with emotion, I vowed to Emily. Then, Adam. Emily whispered my name by my ear. Surprised, I looked at her face. She was blushing and smiling. Adam, I love you. I replied with the same words. I love you too, Emily. As the sound of the airplane taking off filled the air, we shared our first kiss. Years later, I can hear our children playing loudly with their phones in the living room. It seems our son has fallen to the floor, perhaps defeated, as our daughter struggles to snatch the phone from his hand, their cries of "give it here" and "no way" mingling. Hey, you've had your turn, right? Let her have it. Emily's voice softly scolds our son. Sulking, he seems to have handed over the phone to his sister. Now, I can hear our daughter's joyous voice. I'm in the study, working while listening to my family. It's a weekend, and I should be at the office due to some pending cases, but I wanted to be near my family, so I'm working remotely. I'm so glad for this convenient world. As I work with a grin, the door to the study opens. Why not take a break? I made cookies. My ever-beautiful wife, Emily, peeks in. Let's take a break. I've been smelling something sweet and getting hungry. Saying this, I put my computer to sleep and stand up. As Emily smoothly enters the study, I kiss her lightly on the forehead. Emily, blushing, returns the gesture with a kiss on my cheek. I wonder if I've managed to make her as happy as she has loved me over the years. Whether she knows my farts or not, Emily always shows me a contented smile. With Emily, no matter what uncertainties we face, I know we can overcome them together. I leave the study, heading to the living room where our children are waiting. Is it okay for a man over 50 like me to still want these things? Her voice asking me to try just one more time shook my self-control. My name is Daniel. As a single father, I raised my son, who is now 25, and before I knew it, I turned 55. It's been 10 years since my wife, Michelle, passed away. The memories of those days are still vivid in my mind. Michelle complained about feeling bloated, and although I thought it was nothing serious, I encouraged her to visit the hospital. However, the diagnosis was pancreatic cancer with only 1 month to live. I couldn't believe it. After all, my wife looked healthy right before me. Michelle and our son, Andrew, panicked about the sudden news. That's when I decided to take some time off from work. I'm a carpenter. I plunged into this world right after graduating from high school. At the time, I was working on building a new house, commissioned by an architect I was close with. When I explained the situation, both the architect and the client readily agreed to delay the construction period. For the month until Michelle passed away, I devoted myself to caring for her at home, fully supporting Andrew as well. I made sure to live those days without any regrets. It was the most intense month of my life. After she passed away and I was organizing her belongings, I found a drawer filled with numerous letters. There were letters prepared for Andrew to receive each year until he turned 20, titled Dear Andrew, Dear 16-year-old Andrew, Dear 17-year-old Andrew, and even one for when he gets married, titled Dear Andrew on his wedding day. And I found a letter addressed to me as well. I carefully opened the envelope and read it. The list included age-specific gifts she wanted to give Andrew for his birthdays, his favorite recipes, and mine. It even detailed instructions on how to perform various household tasks. How had she written so much without me noticing? After receiving her terminal diagnosis, she was energetic for about a week, but then quickly deteriorated. Perhaps the weak pen pressure in some places was from when she wasn't feeling well. Imagining Michelle writing these letters in pain brought tears to my eyes. And on the last page, it was written, "Dear Daniel, after I settle in heaven, fall in love again, nurture love with someone else, I look forward to discussing your wonderful qualities with that person in heaven." I cried. It had been a while since the funeral, but I had never cried until then. I felt it was unmanly, and somehow, tears just wouldn't come. But upon reading this letter, I cried. It was probably the most I had ever cried in my life. I couldn't imagine feeling up for romance at all. That letter felt like a final farewell, and I kept it hidden deep in the drawer. Even when I opened the drawer to check what to give Andrew for his birthday, I made sure not to look at that last letter. It's been 10 years since then. Even now, at 55, I don't feel like getting into a relationship. Andrew, now 25, still lives at home. I've suggested countless times that he should consider living on his own, but, "Dad, I'm getting married," he suddenly announced one day. Despite all my urging for him to move out, the thought of him actually leaving felt lonely. Whether he knew how melancholic I felt or not, he cheerfully shared his news. "She's a bit older than me, but she's beautiful. It was love at first sight at a mixer, and I really pursued her. When can I bring her over?" He seemed a bit shy yet visibly happy. I could tell he had found a good partner as the corners of my eyes crinkled with a smile. My work schedule is flexible, so I can make time whenever needed. When I told him to let me know a convenient day, he quickly left. He mentioned he was going on a date. "Is today okay?" he asked, but I advised against it since neither I nor his partner were probably ready, and sent him off on his date. Really, he has grown into a man who lacks consideration. But I raised him, so maybe it can't be helped. Speaking of which, I remembered there was a gift Michelle wanted to give him for his wedding, and for the first time in a long while, I rummaged through the drawer. I hadn't opened the drawer for 5 years since the letters were meant to be given to him only until he turned 20. As I was searching through the drawer, a piece of paper fluttered down. A glimpse of Dear Daniel caught my eye. It was the last page of that letter. The letter that was supposed to be at the bottom of the drawer had fallen out. It was as if it was insisting on something. What could it be? Laughing off the sudden thought, I put the letter back deep in the drawer. 1 week after Andrew announced his engagement, he brought his fiancée to meet me. "I am Jessica. Nice to meet you." The woman who looked me straight in the eye was 28, 3 years older than Andrew. "It seems you were nervous too, Daniel." Taken aback by her comment, I was momentarily confused. Turning to Andrew, I noticed he was frowning. "Dad, your shirt is inside out." "Ah, shoot." As I scrambled, Jessica burst out laughing. "That's it, I can't handle it. I love how funny you are, Daniel." Her saying "I love you" caught me off guard. This girl, she reminds me of someone. Especially her smiling face looks like someone. But who was it? Lately, these things don't come to mind easily. I don't know much about recent pop stars or actresses, but she must look like some celebrity. Deciding to blame it on my age, I stopped trying to figure out who Jessica resembled. She seems like a fine young lady, I thought as I watched Jessica and Andrew leave through the front door. I spoke to Michelle's photo. "Michelle, don't you think Andrew has caught a fine woman? She was very classy. We're going to meet her parents soon. I'll make sure not to wear my shirt inside out then. They say we're going to eat French food. Remember, we went just once. The napkins and all those knives were quite a hassle. Her mother is a single mom too. It's good. It would have been hard to face both of them alone." I talked aimlessly and then stood up. It felt like Michelle was smiling a little. On the day of the meal, I checked my shirt carefully and headed to the restaurant in my suit. Andrew was also in a suit, and Jessica wore a beautiful dress. Jessica, who had been checking her mobile phone, turned to me with an apologetic look. "I'm sorry, my mother will be a little late due to work. She wants us to go in first," she said. So, we decided to enter the restaurant. The table was set beautifully with a cream-colored tablecloth, dishes, cutlery, and napkins all neatly arranged. Just seeing this made me a bit nervous. Uncharacteristically, I had studied up on the internet. The napkin, I remembered, goes like this on my lap. As I was about to pick up the napkin, a small shriek from Jessica made me jump. "Hey, what are you doing?" Looking up, I saw Andrew picking up the finger bowl, about to drink the water. What? He didn't even understand what he was being scolded for. It seems I should have made Andrew brush up on his manners. That's not drinking water. Look, this is how you wash your fingers. Watching her instruct briskly, I was suddenly reminded of my high school days. I was often scolded like that too. By a girl who was the class rep and my first girlfriend. Back then, I was planning to go straight into carpentry instead of pursuing further education, so I was quite the troublemaker. I fell for a girl who wasn't afraid to scold me whenever I acted up. Initially, she was my nemesis, but somehow we ended up dating. Oh right, she confessed to me. She said she couldn't just leave me be. I never expected a class rep to fall for me, so it was quite a surprise and a delight. Come to think of it, Jessica's way of scolding. It's a bit like how she used to scold. Now that I think about it, even her face. Wait, what was her name? As I pondered this, a woman appeared, saying, "Sorry I'm late." The face I had just been remembering, now slightly marked by wrinkles. She seemed like a doppelganger of the woman in my mind, and I couldn't help but exclaim. Could it be? Then, I recalled the class rep's name and said it out loud. Nicole. The woman widened her eyes and looked at me intently. Apparently, she didn't remember right away. It's me, Daniel, remember, from high school. As I began to explain, realization dawned on her face. What, Daniel, no way, She seemed hesitant to continue, so I took over. I've grown a bit, haven't I? Laughing heartily, Nicole blushed. Sorry, you've, well, not so much gotten fat as become more robust. She didn't forget to put a positive spin on it. That's right. She was always like that. You two know each other. We had left the main subjects of the meeting, our children, behind. As I pondered how to explain, Nicole boldly declared, "We were classmates in high school. Actually, we dated back then." The children were visibly shocked by her revelation. I hadn't expected her to disclose that we dated, and it flustered me a bit. As if anticipating my disarray, Nicole blurted out, "There's no point hiding it. Isn't it a miracle? Our children, who we dated in high school, are getting married to each other." She seemed a bit excited. Understandably so. I was excited too. Actually, I was still feeling quite surreal. What are the odds? The conversation flowed freely from then on, and time flew by quickly, and before we knew it, we had finished dessert. Initially, the focus was on the children. I described Andrew as a bit of a show-off, a troublemaker like me, and so carefree that he wouldn't even bother to prepare for occasions like this. Nicole, while being glared at by Jessica, happily talked about how Jessica was so serious and responsible that she never thought she would get married, but was delighted that she could marry such a wonderful person. Then the conversation turned to us. Nicole knew my wife had passed away, as she had heard it from Jessica. She consoled me, acknowledging how difficult it must have been to lose my wife during Andrew's sensitive teenage years, and how hard it surely was. Nicole mentioned that she had divorced her husband due to personality differences when Jessica was in elementary school. Her ex-husband quickly remarried, but she had been too busy raising Jessica alone to think about her own relationships, remaining single since then. As we were deep in conversation, I noticed the kids watching us. They seemed to be smirking a bit. "They look good together, don't they?" Andrew commented, looking at Jessica. To which Jessica jokingly replied, "Why don't they just date then? Don't tease us." I glared at them, but Nicole just looked relaxed. "Oh, come on, it's fine, you've become so rigid," she teased. It felt like the roles of the class rep and the mischievous boy had reversed. Despite being a single mother, Nicole had aged gracefully. After chatting for a while longer, we parted ways. I had put on weight, but she hadn't changed much. She usually wears suits for work, and they really look sharp on her. While thinking about this, Andrew and I were walking home. He teased again, "Didn't it seem like there was a good vibe?" At my age, what good vibe could there possibly be? I retorted sharply. But he continued teasing, Hey, could something happen between you two?" Furthermore, he added, "Why did you guys break up? It seemed fine. Oh, if you had stayed together, would I not have been born?" I decided to ignore that comment. "Why did we break up?" That's right. Nicole went to college, and I pursued carpentry. We ended up in a long-distance relationship, and our lifestyles were so different that we mutually agreed to part ways. We had been together for just over a year, starting when we were seniors in high school. As I pondered this, he cheerfully mentioned, "We'll be seeing each other a lot during the wedding preparations, so good luck." Should parents even be this involved in wedding planning? In my time, it was mostly just the couple doing the preparations, but times might have changed. I didn't mind meeting her, though. Indeed, we ended up seeing each other frequently at the planning meetings. Whether or not dresses and tuxedos suited them was one thing, but choosing the color and type of paper for the invitations seemed trivial to me. However, Nicole, holding an invitation envelope, excitedly remarked, "Oh, this green is lovely. This one's cute too, but pink might be too much for Andrew, don't you think? What do you think, Daniel?" Caught in the spotlight, I pointed to the pink envelopes she favored. "Wow, Dad, that's your taste," he exclaimed. "Such matters should be left to the preferences of women." I'd have to give him a proper talk about that later. "You probably reacted the same way when you were young, didn't you, Daniel?" she said playfully, giving me an upward glance. "I wonder if it's a testament to your wife's education." Thoughtfully, Nicole says, "It seems Nicole had easily figured out that I was accommodating her preferences. Being so involved in the wedding venue felt somewhat uncomfortable. Though Andrew insisted, and I reluctantly accompanied him, these minor exchanges were somewhat enjoyable. Once we get married, should all four of us live together? It sounds like it could be fun." After the color of the invitations was decided and the planner left, leaving just the four of us, Jessica dropped this bombshell. I blushed deeply and denied it outright. Nicole was laughing. Could it be that she wasn't entirely opposed to the idea? If we could laugh together like this, maybe remarriage wasn't such a bad idea. But surely, it was unthinkable for the parents of the children getting married to each other to also marry. Nicole may have aged beautifully, but I had become more robust due to my job, complete with a beer belly. I found myself daydreaming about a life with Nicole, only to dismiss the thought almost immediately. Though it was a bit exhausting, the thrill of our enjoyable conversation lingered as Andrew and I returned home. The house felt unusually cold and bleak. Perhaps it was a backlash from the happy feelings I had just experienced. One photo frame in the living room caught my eye. I realized I hadn't spoken to Michelle in a while. I stared blankly at her photo. The dust-covered frame felt like a blow to my head, proof of my recent neglect. I picked up her photo and wiped off the dust. "Sorry about this, letting so much dust gather." I spoke softly. Of course, there was no reply from her. What was I getting so carried away about? Thinking about romance at this point, I'd be doing you wrong, wouldn't I? I muttered again. There was a noise from behind. I wondered if Andrew had overheard my disheartened voice. After that, I started making excuses to avoid going to the planning meetings I was invited to. Although work was a bit busier, I simply didn't feel like attending. Nicole, with whom I had exchanged contact details, occasionally sent me messages to check in with the results of the planning meetings. However, I ignored those messages too. A grown man indulging in romance seemed undignified. Yes. I feared that if I kept meeting Nicole, I wouldn't be able to stop my feelings. I didn't deserve to face Michelle. To dispel my feelings for Nicole, I polished the photo frame until it sparkled. Then, a few months later, the day of Andrew and Jessica's wedding arrived. Since I hadn't replied to Nicole's messages, it felt awkward to face her, so I just exchanged brief greetings and then paced restlessly in the lobby, striking up idle conversations with relatives on the groom's side. As the reception began, things got busy. I toasted with guests and made small talk. Nicole was doing the same. Somehow, I felt relieved that there was some distance between us. Because Nicole looked breathtakingly beautiful in her finery. Standing next to her, it felt like my heart might just jump out. The reception proceeded smoothly, and as the atmosphere settled, a spotlight suddenly shone on me. Andrew and Jessica, the bride and groom, looked at me with surprised expressions. I had arranged a surprise with the planner. Thank you all for being here today. Now, I would like to read a letter from my wife in heaven, addressed to Andrew and Jessica. As I spoke into the microphone, he stared at me wide-eyed. Dear Andrew, congratulations on your wedding. Dear the bride, Jessica, thank you for marrying Andrew. I filled in the blank where it was written to the bride, and read it aloud. This was the last letter Michelle had written before she passed away. Have you learned to eat eggplants you used to hate? I read, and laughter spilled from Andrew's friends. He still hates eggplants. I continued reading the letter impassively to avoid getting choked up with tears. Soft sobbing could be heard around the venue. This reception, I am watching from the sky. I am so happy to see you looking incredibly joyful. May you both be happy forever. Take good care of Jessica. With that, I folded the letter, concluding the emotional moment. I was fidgety partly because of this. Until I finished reading Michelle's letter, I felt barely alive. After completing this important task, I let out a huge sigh of relief. Andrew was teary-eyed but looked at me and grinned mischievously. What was that sly smile about? As I started to feel less tense and more aware of my surroundings, I noticed that the spotlight had shifted to Andrew. He then took the microphone in his hand. What was he planning to do with the microphone? As I wondered, he also took a letter. Familiar pink stationery. It was the same kind of paper I was holding in my hand. Could it be? From mother to father, I have a letter to read on her behalf, he announced, sending a shock through me. As I stood there dazed, his lips curled into a mischievous grin. Actually, there are two letters, one for if father had remarried, and one for if he hadn't. Since he hasn't remarried, I'll read this one, he said, and the room erupted in laughter. My brain was still trying to catch up. Dear Daniel, so you still haven't remarried? His dramatic shout prompted more laughter from the crowd. You were told to fall in love, but you're still the serious Daniel, aren't you? But see, Andrew is getting married and looks happy, right? I want you to find happiness too. Since Andrew is starting his own family, you should too, Daniel. And there was a pause before the next words. I look forward to the day in heaven when I can talk about your wonderful qualities with your new partner. Indeed, those were the words. the last words I had tucked away deep in a drawer. I bawled my eyes out. Unbecoming of my age, in front of many eyes, I couldn't stop sobbing. While the MC cleverly filled up the gap with an ad-lib, I managed to compose myself, holding a handkerchief in one hand. Influenced by my sobs, Andrew and Jessica, tears in their eyes, took the microphone. And both began speaking simultaneously. Mom, Dad. Nicole and I exchanged surprised glances. We've decided to read a letter from both of us to both our parents. Andrew and Jessica began speaking in turns. I was quite the troublemaker, he confessed. His words sent a wave of laughter through the crowd. And I was the typical class rep, she added. This time, laughter enveloped the bright side of the room. Dad was a troublemaker too. The spotlight turned to me. I had a bad feeling about where this was heading. Mom was also a class rep. Nicole's eyes widened in surprise. I am forever grateful to my dad, who raised me alone. I am forever grateful to my mom, who raised me alone. Their words synchronized perfectly. And now, I will be happy with Jessica. I, too, will be happy with Andrew. And so, the two said together, please make sure Dad and Mom are also happy. I can tell that Nicole is shivering next to me. When I try to look at Nicole, Andrew suddenly shouts, Dad. Startled, I look straight at Andrew again. Talking with Mom in heaven, that must be Nicole's job. Hearing him shout that, I panic. Don't say such reckless things. You're making Nicole uncomfortable. As I say that, Jessica grabs the microphone. Mom, it's not so bad, right? Hearing her words, I finally look at Nicole, who has her face covered with her hands, blushing to her ears. Then, Nicole's lips move. It's not something I should say in front of everyone. Nicole whispers to me in a voice so low that only I can hear. I know you care deeply for Michelle. Those words stir my heart. And they make me hopeful. Should I, a man over 50, still hope for such things? But, shall we try it just one more time? Her whispered continuation shakes my self-control. Andrew and Jessica seem to hear it, as they are both smiling broadly. Trying not to look at their faces, I speak to Nicole. But, it's not fair to Michelle or you. Barely squeezing out the words, Nicole chuckles. Silly. I'll probably get along famously with Michelle in heaven. After all, we have the same taste in men. Knocked out by her words. Thinking about our children marrying and dismarrying too, it's bizarre. Concerned about looking foolish in front of relatives, friends of our children, I let go of all such worries and embrace Nicole. I remember the first time I held her during high school. It was after she confessed her feelings to me. Just like that time, I make the same promise as I did in high school, to cherish her delicate and slender form. I will always be there for you. This time for sure. I add those words to my old vow. Years later, I'm pacing between the living room and the front door. Seeing me, Nicole sighs at Michelle's picture, exasperated. Can you see him? He can't settle down. She speaks to Michelle. You've met Annie at the hospital, right? What's got you so fidgety? Challenge, I retort. It's her first time coming to this house. Annie is our granddaughter. Nicole dismisses my argument with the okay, and sits down by the window. She gestures for me to come over. I obediently follow. Sitting and looking out at the garden, I see a small tree reaching up to the sky. Nicole and I planted it when we remarried. Given our age, we don't have much time left. Feeling faint-hearted, I mentioned this to Nicole, who bought a sapling. Let's live long enough to see this tree grow taller than the house, and then have a nice chat with Michelle. Her smile as she said this is dazzling. and I'm reminded of it every time I see this tree. It seems like it will take a while for that tree to reach the roof. Hearing that, Nicole says, "Let's make lots of memories in that time." Nicole rests her small head on my shoulder. I wrap my arm around her shoulders. I love this peaceful moment by the window. It feels like Michelle is laughing behind us. Just then, I hear the sound of a car engine. Oh, looks like they are here. It's probably Andrew and Jessica's car. They've come to visit, bringing our first grandchild. We need to greet them. Nicole and I exchange glances, stand up, and walk towards the entrance.
You must have cunningly stolen someone else's credit. I don't trust a dull man like you. You are stepping down from this project as well. Having someone like you represent our company is an embarrassment.
The president's daughter's words were utterly unreasonable, one-sided, and dripping with contempt and discrimination. Suddenly, something inside me exploded.
Embarrassment, I see. Well then, I'll step down as the project manager, and while I'm at it, I'll resign from this company too.
To my breaking point, the two villains just smirked with pleasure.
Don't leave any trace of a dull man like you in our company. You'd be a stain on our reputation. Clean up everything and get out quickly.
With these cruel, final words, she pushed me away. At that moment, I decided, what would really happen if I erased all traces of myself? I resolved then to make these corrupt villains realize the true impact. I'm Chris. This year, I turned 30, just another regular guy working a white-collar job. Today, I'd like to share how even a plain guy like me can change dramatically, just by adjusting his mindset. Born in the suburbs of New York, I wasn't particularly bright as a child and didn't have any special talents. From elementary school, I was what you'd call one of the crowd. I was the kind of kid who blended into the background in a class full of average students. My grades were always below average, and I wasn't athletic, making sports days a real pain. When I moved up to middle school, I joined the basketball team as a typical average kid because it was the most popular club. Since our school team was not strong, we often got thrashed in games, and I have no fond memories of any tournaments. By the 9th grade, my academic performance hadn't improved, and my grades continued to struggle. So, I ended up failing to get into my first-choice public high school. Reluctantly, I attended a private high school with lower standards. Since we weren't exactly wealthy, my mom often reminded me bitterly, "I'm paying a lot for you to attend this private school." I was quite traumatized by this experience of failing to get into my first-choice high school. After that, I grew up to be a cold and resigned teenager who was possessed by nihilism attitude and thinking that even if I tried my best, it would be useless anyway. In high school, I didn't study seriously. I just played games and hung out aimlessly with friends, wasting my high school years. As my high school days passed, the time to decide my future came. I gave up on the idea of going to college right from the start. Thinking I'd probably fail even at a low-ranked university, I decided to get a job right after high school. I applied to various companies, including civil service positions, but didn't do well. Somehow, I managed to land a job at a fairly large company called Ace Trading. At this company, except for the warehouse, logistics, and fieldwork, almost all of the desk-bound employees were college-educated. The few high school graduates there were much older, middle-aged men and women. I was assigned to the department in charge of managing the company's internal systems. And my direct boss there was Sam, the department head, who was practically royalty in the office. Sam was an elite with a degree from a prestigious university, from a wealthy family, and he was a tall, handsome man. However, Sam's character was terrible. Ever since I was new, Sam constantly criticized me harshly for my low educational background.
Can't you even handle something this simple? Typical uneducated quality, and you're not even a real asset to our team, you useless wreck.
These were the kinds of insults I faced daily from Sam. I hated Sam's torment and abuse, but I convinced myself, well, I'm lowly educated. Maybe it's true that I'm useless. My self-esteem was low compared to everyone else, especially since my failure to get into the high school. So even when Sam berated me, all I could do was weakly apologize. This pathetic attitude only irritated Sam more, and his insults towards me escalated. While these depressing days dragged on, I reached my 5th year at the company. At this point, Sam's harassment became extraordinarily intense. In retrospect, I think he was seriously trying to exhaust me both mentally and physically, aiming to drive me out of the company. As soon as the 5th fiscal year began, Sam called me in and suddenly dumped an enormous amount of work on me. It was easily 5 times the volume of work I had managed before. Moreover, it included tasks in areas where I lacked skills.
You've been freeloading here for 5 years now. No more mercy. Get this work done by the deadline or you'll find yourself out of a job.
Sam was setting a malicious trap, dripping with sarcasm, aiming to get rid of me. Unable to argue back, all I could muster was a bewildered "I'll try my best." At this time, for the first time in my life, I was struck by a fierce sense of urgency from the bottom of my heart that I had to do something. Fueled by a rage similar to anger towards my past inefficacies, I strongly wanted to prove Sam wrong, who always looked down on me. I spent sleepless nights pondering strategies, exhaustively searching online for any possible way to handle it successfully. Eventually, I concluded, this project can be largely solved by using a certain programming that I have absolutely no skills in, and can also save a lot of time. Although the programming was challenging, mastering it could greatly benefit my work and help me become a valued employee. I got these conclusions. Exactly as saying goes, every crisis is an opportunity. Until now, I had never immersed myself deeply to master anything, but at this moment, I resolved to dedicate my life to this challenge. I was done with being looked down upon, ridiculed, and insulted. Frustration can sometimes be a powerful catalyst for action. After work, I attended intensive programming courses and continued to study vigorously at home, sparing no time for sleep. Initially, my motivation was purely to ease my workload, but as I learned more, I gradually discovered the joy of programming and became engrossed in it. As a result, I was able to manage the increased workload with ease. And the quality of my work was highly praised by many. For the first time in 5 years as an inept and educated employee, I was recognized and valued by others in the company. My enthusiasm for learning programming grew, and my skills improved significantly. Consequently, my standing in the company rose rapidly. To my own disbelief, I became a rising star, attracting attention not just from other departments but also from outside the company. My programming skills and the high quality of my work even led to a lucrative headhunting offer from a multinational competitor. Being recognized and appreciated gradually restored my low self-esteem. The cycle of negativity that had plagued my work life turned around in a fascinating way. I became more proactive at work, and as a result, my communication with colleagues improved. Employees who once clearly despised me now looked at me with respect. My efforts caught the attention of the upper management, and I was entrusted with leading major, high-profile projects within the company. It was as if a bolt from the blue had changed my life in ways I had never even dared to dream of. As I rapidly made a name for myself, various people within the company began to speak highly of me.
How could someone as capable as Chris have been underperforming all this time? It's strange.
It seems Chris was only passive because of the harassment from his immediate boss, Sam. Was Sam jealous of Chris's talents and trying to crush him? Many employees began to whisper that Sam had been oppressing me, which had prevented me from excelling until now. These rumors eventually reached Sam's ears. Knowing about my success and the high regard I was held in did not sit well with him at all. "Just you watch, you uneducated useless fool, don't get cocky." Sam, who despised me, seemed to have thought of a dreadful plan at this time. The system I developed significantly streamlined operations across most departments, earning me widespread acclaim. Pleased to be recognized and make everyone happy, I pushed myself too hard and ended up falling ill. I had to take a few days off from work. After a few days of rest, my health improved. Fully recovered, I returned to work and attended a meeting for a massive project involving several other companies. Unexpectedly, a notable figure appeared at the inspection. It was Rachel Turner, the daughter of the family that owned Ace Trading. Our company, Ace Trading, was large enough to be classified as a major corporation, but had never gone public, maintaining a family-owned structure with a tradition of succession. Therefore, the president, Mr. Turner, was Rachel's father, and the chairman was her grandfather. Rachel herself, currently the executive vice president, was promised to be the next president. After the meeting, Rachel walked briskly over to me and said,
"So you're Chris. I'd appreciate it if you didn't overstep your bounds as if you represent us. Anyway, come to the president's office afterward."
I was summoned coldly and abruptly. It was definitely not a good call. It seemed that Rachel, the president's daughter, had taken a dislike to me for some reason. When I showed up at the president's office as instructed, Mr. Turner wasn't there, but Rachel was sitting at his desk, waiting. Shockingly, someone was standing beside the president's chair with a smug grin. It was none other than my manager, Sam. Without caring about my momentary surprise, Rachel launched into a tirade. "I've heard quite a lot about you from Sam here, Chris. I hear you were skiving off until yesterday. Seems like you've really been dragging the company down." I couldn't understand why Rachel was targeting me, but at that moment, I realized everything. Sam must have been feeding her all the negatives and past failures about me. I glared at Sam involuntarily, but he only returned a mocking smile. Rachel, clearly irritated by my silence, pressed on.
"Chris, it seems that you are a high school graduate with a really low level of education. I don't know how a bottom feeder who didn't even go to college could become an employee of our company. We can't entrust this important project to you with a low level of education."
Astonished by her rude remarks, I was at a loss for words. "Excuse me, but I was appointed as the project manager based solely on my track record in programming." I replied calmly, but this only made Rachel more furious, and she raised her eyebrows in anger. "Your assessment must be fraudulent. You must have cunningly stolen someone else's credit. I don't trust a dull man like you. You're stepping down from this project. Having someone like you represent us is an embarrassment." Faced with a level of disdain and scorn I hadn't experienced in a while, something inside me exploded.
"Embarrassment? Okay, I understand. Then I'll step down as the project manager, and while I'm at it, I'll resign from this company as well."
I had finally reached my breaking point. I had intended to prove myself in this company, but I couldn't muster the enthusiasm to continue under such a future president.
"That's perfect. We don't need someone like you here, isn't it right, Sam?"
Indeed. I threw them one last look of contempt and was about to leave the president's office when Rachel's voice hit me like a final blow.
"Make sure you leave no trace of yourself here. You'd be a stain on our company. Clean everything up and get out quickly."
Without responding, I left the president's office. When I reached my desk, I turned on my computer and did my last piece of work. I deleted all the files I had created, and disabling the internal system for which I held the patent. After packing up my personal belongings and emptying my desk, I left the company for good. After resigning from Ace Trading, I joined a multinational competitor that had been scouting me. The treatment at my new job was excellent. My salary was 10 times what it had been, plus significant performance bonuses. More than the financial rewards, I was thrilled by the freedom to work as I pleased. There were no malicious, toxic bosses like Sam. My proposals were quickly discussed in meetings, and if well received, immediately greenlit as new projects. Since the switch, I have truly enjoyed my programming work like never before. Leaving Ace Trading was truly the best decision. Ironically, I find myself grateful to Rachel and Sam. What happened to Ace Trading after I left? Following Rachel's parting words, the system I deleted became inoperable, and the company plunged into chaos. I had anticipated this, so I warned Rachel and Sam when I left.
It's fine if you drive me out, but if you erase my traces, no one will be able to use the system I developed.
Still, Rachel and Sam scoffed and laughed it off.
No, it's actually convenient. Let's scrap that pathetic system you developed. I've always hated it. We'll just create a better one.
Even after I warned them out of kindness, they responded with such ingratitude that I said, "Oh, really? Then please do as you please. But don't come prying to me later because I won't know anything about it." And I left the company with that ultimatum. However, afterwards, each workplace within the company fell into complete panic. It was only natural, as the core internal system suddenly stopped working, and it was replaced by a less convenient and inferior system every step of the way. Employee dissatisfaction and stress peaked, and they flooded Rachel and Sam with complaints.
It's because you drove Chris out that this has happened. It's not working at all. Do something, bring Chris back.
Or apologize to him and let us use his system. The employees were furious, nearly attacking Rachel and Sam, but they remained defiant.
How can we do such a humiliating thing? Figure it out yourselves. That's your job. Chris is not needed here, so there's no way we'll bring him back. Just adapt and use a new system.
Faced with such insincere and irresponsible answers, the employees snapped. Unable to endure a workplace that only demanded self-help from its staff, employees began to resign one after another, creating an extraordinary situation. Once that cycle started, it didn't stop. Initially, the company tried to compensate for the staff shortage by hiring temp agencies, but that quickly reached its limits, and operations began to falter. Across the company's departments, the quality of work significantly dropped, and gaps in transactions and other credibility issues arose. As a result, Ace Trading's social credit dropped to the extreme, and its longtime business partners cut contracts one after another. Furthermore, the financial statements continued to show significant operational deficits, leading to insolvency, and eventually, Ace Trading went bankrupt. After the bankruptcy, under corporate restructuring laws, the multinational company I joined acquired Ace Trading, and the earnest employees were retained. However, Rachel and the former management family were ousted. Sam, her sycophant, was completely dismissed as well. Interestingly, it was only then that Sam came to seek my help. Dismissed and cornered, he desperately turned to me, his supposed enemy, begging for help.
I took care of you so much in the past. Please, can you help me fix things?
I was utterly astounded by Sam's audacity.
You took care of me? You mean you harassed and looked down on me? If I am to appeal anything to the higher-ups,
it would be to advise them not to hire someone deceitful and mean-spirited like you. In response to my words, Sam was furious and pretended to throw his phone, but he stopped halfway and left dejectedly. I heard through the grapevine that for a while, Sam's wife worked in the nightlife industry to maintain their lifestyle, but that didn't last long. Eventually, they had to sell their luxury condo near central New York and move to Connecticut. His daughter, who had been attending a prestigious private elementary school, was transferred to a public school in Connecticut, as they could no longer afford the tuition. Sam is now crawling around as a salesperson in a Connecticut real estate company unrelated to his previous work. Naturally, for someone who only learned to get ahead by scheming, this was to be expected. Now, not only Sam but his entire family is experiencing hardship and exposed to the harsh realities of the world. The Turner family, the business owners, has also fallen into decline. Rachel and her father's luxurious New York homes were sold, and now they live quietly in the suburbs of San Diego. It took time, but it was indeed a fitting end for such wicked people, just like the saying, "Heaven's net is wide and lets nothing through." What goes around comes around. As for my current situation, thanks to my successive achievements at the multinational company I joined, I have become well known in the industry. After further leveling up and developing new systems and apps, I gained enough confidence from the royalties alone to go independent, and last year, I finally started my own company. Now I'm running my own business. It is challenging, but every day is fulfilling and enjoyable. Being able to work with excitement every day is a truly fortunate thing, when I think about it. Looking back, I regret my apathetic and half-hearted teenage years following my failure, but I also recognize that it is precisely those setbacks that have led to where I am now.
Alex, I'll be blunt, could you quit the company?
Suddenly asked to resign by Bob, I was taken aback.
What?
To be clear, you're just an eyesore. If you don't quit, I might just have to end the business dealings with my dad's company. How about that?
That's because of your mistake, Bob.
At my comment, Bob's face turned grim and he started yelling threateningly.
Shut up, I didn't make any mistakes. It's all your fault. If you don't quit soon, I'll have my dad fire you.
Bob was hired just because he was the son of a client company's president. He had always been a source of frustration with his selfish behavior, but this incident was especially a headache. After much consideration, I decided it wasn't wise to oppose Bob, and resolved to quit right there and then. When I got home, I confessed to my wife, Dorothy, that I was quitting my job, hanging my head in shame at my own helplessness. I'm sorry, I got fired today. Expecting a scolding, I timidly looked up at my wife's face, but to my surprise, she smiled broadly and embraced me comfortingly. That's great. Thank you for quitting. Surprised by her unexpected words, I tilted my head in confusion. My name is Alex. I am a 28-year-old employee at a construction company. My father is a well-known architect who has worked on everything from station buildings and government offices to custom homes. Growing up watching my father, I've always had a strong admiration for architecture and aspired to do the same type of work. Ever since I was little, I loved seeing the buildings my father worked on, and would spend hours poring over the many architecture books, blueprints, and photo albums at his office, dreaming of the day I could do similar work. My father was pleased with my interest and often took me to art museums on weekends to teach me about architectural styles in a playful way. I chose a high school with an architectural program and went on to attend one of the most prestigious architecture schools in the US, where I graduated successfully. During my student years, whenever I had time, I'd visit cafes, commercial facilities, and museums to study their structures and materials, compiling reports that made my peers call me an architecture nerd, but I enjoyed those times immensely. Over those 6 years from high school to college graduation, I amassed a vast collection of reports that still occupy a cherished place on my bookshelf. After graduating from university, I joined a local small construction company, where I work to this day. I chose a smaller construction company over a major one because I believed it would allow me to visit various construction sites and engage in a variety of tasks. This plan worked out well, and now I handle multiple construction projects, juggling several sites each day. Though I thought I had made a strong foundation of architectural knowledge during my studies, practical experience is something I am still gaining. It's been 6 years since I joined the company, but there's still so much to learn from the experienced colleagues on site. I have been consistently studying architecture alongside my job. Someday, I want to create a building that I have designed myself. That's what keeps me chasing this dream. I may be a dull architecture nerd, but I have someone who supports me through it all. My wife, Dorothy. Dorothy was a classmate from high school, beautiful and cheerful, and the most popular girl in the class. Of course, like many others, I was one of the many who admired her, but my determination set me apart. Right after meeting her at the start of high school, I mustered all my courage and confessed my feelings. "Dorothy, I like you. Will you go out with me?" She was surprised, with her face turning red, but she accepted my confession.
Really? We haven't known each other long, Alex, but why me?
It's hard to explain why, but before I knew it, I had fallen hopelessly in love with you. Dorothy, you're kind to everyone and always so cheerful. Thank you. Please, will you go out with me? I don't think many people have fallen for me as hard as you have, if I'm good enough for you. I'll never forget Dorothy's bashful smile in that moment. Even after we started dating, I was determined not to let any other guy have her. We walked to and from school together as much as possible, and even when we were in different classes, I'd find time during breaks to see her, continually showering her with affection. My friend joked about my actions, saying, "Stop being her stalker," but I was that desperate to keep Dorothy close. Also, the vast amount of reports I managed to compile during my student years was thanks to Dorothy's kindness, as she patiently accompanied me on architectural site visits, which I called dates. Dorothy didn't go to college, but said she had something she wanted to do, and started working. We continued our relationship through my university years, and 3 years ago, we happily got married. Now, she wakes up early every morning to prepare delicious, nutritious lunches for me as I work on construction sites. Dorothy is an excellent cook, practically professional. My colleagues are envious of the lovingly prepared lunches she makes, and I proudly eat them every day at noon. Once or twice a month, I forget my precious lunch, and she brings it to the site for me. One day, as I was enjoying both a happy home life and a successful career, the son of the president of a major construction company joined our company. Bob, 25 years old, was hired due to strong recommendation by President Taylor, his father and president of a client company. Bob had just become a licensed architect and needed to accumulate practical experience. With the title of a young certified architect, everyone at the company welcomed him warmly. "This is Bob, who will be joining the design department from today. Everyone, please take good care of him." "Hello, I'm Bob. I look forward to working with you starting today." Saying that, Bob gave a casual greeting. At first, he seemed humble, but once the new employee training started, his true nature gradually became apparent. As I was somewhat close in age, I was assigned to be his trainer, but guiding him proved to be more challenging than expected. One day, I had asked Bob to prepare some design documents for a construction site, but after discovering several calculation errors, I approached him about it. "Bob, can we talk?" "Yes, what is it?" "I was looking at the documents you prepared yesterday, and there are some mistakes in the numbers here." "Is that so?" "Yes, so I need you to correct them." "Why do I have to do that? Couldn't you just fix them when you noticed? Are you trying to harass me?" He would listen quietly when taught, but when corrected or pointed out, he became emotional and argumentative, which was troublesome. "No, that's wrong. It's good for you to know what you got wrong to prevent the same mistakes in the future." I don't need that kind of thing. You know I'm the boss's son, right? Minor chores like that are for the lower ranks to handle, not me." I was frustrated by Bob's dismissive attitude and the way he scoffed at my advice. It turned out that Bob, he never missed an opportunity to remind everyone he was the son of a client CEO, was an incredibly troublesome person. Despite this, my colleagues and I tried to be considerate and teach him about the job, but Bob's behavior worsened day by day, making increasingly negative remarks that soured the atmosphere. "Bob, about the on-site training coming up." "Hot, what's this about going to a site? No way. Why do I have to go there?" "Why? Because you need to learn the practical aspects of the field work as part of the training." "I don't need to. After all, I'm a future president. Besides, if you keep nagging, I might just tell my dad and get you fired. How about that? Fired. But on-site training is really important.
You're so persistent. Are you sure you want me to complain to my dad?
That's
Field work is something you guys do, right? I'm saying it's not my job.
I can count how many times I nearly lost my patience with Bob. He despises field work and looks down on and mocks his colleagues and senior employees. However, because he was the son of a major client, everyone treated him like a hot potato, holding back what they really wanted to say, creating a stifling atmosphere in the company. Amid the unsettling atmosphere created by Bob's behavior, the company decided to establish a project team for a particular construction venture. The job involved a major project, constructing a commercial building as part of the redevelopment of the area in front of the station. We would demolish the old building and construct a new one with 3 underground floors and 15 above ground. To facilitate access from the underground passages, extensive underground construction would also be necessary. While I was fully committed to the project team, the atmosphere turned gloomy when Bob, as requested by the president, was also included in the team. Right from the start, Bob was eager about this major project, declaring he would lead the design process. I will handle the design, so please manage the other miscellaneous tasks among yourselves. Isn't it tough to handle the design alone? It's a breeze for me. I'm a certified architect. Oh, and let me make it clear from the start, no interference needed. Make sure you all understand that. But this is a major building design, you know. Enough, you're being annoying. If I need help, I'll ask for it, so until then, just do your own work quietly. Incredibly, he started insisting on handling the design of such a large building construction by himself. While a renowned architect had set the basic design following the building owner's preferences, and foundational blueprints were available, managing the layout and all design aspects alone was an exceedingly difficult task. Still concerned, I persisted. The workload is going to be immense, Bob. I'm just worried about you. I don't need that kind of concern. It's none of your business. Initially, Bob was enthusiastic about meeting with the client's company, but as days passed, he started turning pale. The building was to have a streamlined design with many custom requests from the client, such as a bold atrium with a domed ceiling at the entrance. To meet these demands, a design combining various materials was necessary, and moreover, it had to be equipped with detailed earthquake resistance measures, including base isolation and damping systems. The structural calculations required had reached a level of utmost complexity. Bob was cornered and spent all day at his desk, clutching his head, seemingly at his wits' end. However, because he had so adamantly insisted on working alone, others hesitated to offer help. Then came the day to present the finalized design plans to the building owner. Worried about any flaws in Bob's documents, I approached him. Bob, has anyone done a final check on the design plans? What? Are you trying to find fault with my design? It's not about finding fault, but shouldn't there be a check? No need, just listen to my presentation. Have you managed the construction schedule and material procurement properly? Of course. Bob disregarded my advice and even insinuated that I and other project members weren't doing our jobs. Without Bob sharing his design plans internally, it was impossible to ensure detailed scheduling and material procurement. How could he not realize this? Project members foresaw the need for significant revisions after today's presentation, and scheduled critical meetings with associated firms for later. Bob's selfish actions were causing trouble in many ways. Frustrated, I swallowed my words, unable to confront him. Representatives from the client's company, including President Johnson, were present. Our side included project members, the sales director Steve, and the executive managing director Paul. As the distinguished members gathered, Bob began his presentation with enthusiasm. Thank you for gathering today. This building incorporates the latest technology, enabling a streamlined facade. We've used double-glazed windows to ensure design aesthetics while enhancing thermal insulation and energy efficiency. That's amazing. It's exciting to think about this building being constructed. I'm honored by your praise. Now, please look at the next document. Regarding the interior, we've realized your request for 5-story atrium with a domed ceiling by using large frames and beams for support. Here is Bob's presentation impressed a client and other project members. However, I was the only one who paled upon reviewing Bob's design and documents. Wait, these calculations are all wrong. This won't support the space for a 5-story atrium. Major revisions are needed. That concludes my presentation. Any questions? Realizing this was my only chance, I raised my hand. What? Alex, what is it? Bob asked, frowning suspiciously. Bob, about the structural calculations in the document you just explained for the interior. Yes, what about it? This calculation won't support the structural integrity for the atrium. It needs to be recalculated, and possibly some design changes are necessary. I apologized to the astonished client, whose eyes widened in surprise. This kind of mistake should have been checked internally. It's like airing our dirty laundry. I'm terribly sorry for this great inconvenience. Our internal checks were not sufficient. No worries, there's still plenty of time in the schedule. By the way, how much modification will be needed now? The beam is not strong enough given its current size, so we'll need a thicker one. This might slightly alter the dome's shape into an oval, or inevitably change its height. What are you talking about? Bob, sorry, just listen for a moment. I went over to Bob and explained the calculation errors in a low voice while pointing at the blueprint. Upon understanding the mistake, Bob's face turned red and he fell silent. I'm very sorry, but I will come back another day to explain the modifications. I'll rework the structural calculations to ensure minimal impact on the proposed design. Also, if you have any comments on the exterior or interior, I'd love to hear them. My explanation managed to smooth things over for the moment. Additionally, as if seizing the opportunity, I received plenty of new requests, which meant significant revisions were in order. After the meeting, the project team members were called in by Paul and Steve and got reprimanded. For the company, it was a major project, and it was unacceptable for errors to be revealed during the final presentation to the client. Bob was also there, maintaining a nonchalant demeanor, but as soon as we left the boardroom, he completely changed. Alex, what have you done? Huh? Don't make me look foolish in front of everyone. Are you harassing me? Are you jealous of me? There is no jealousy. That's why I asked if the preliminary checks were necessary. Shut up. If you were so concerned, you should have spoken up more. I was astounded by Bob's selfishness. I did mention it several times. You were the one who said it wasn't necessary. Luckily, we still have some leeway before construction starts. That's not the point. You always act so high and mighty. It's annoying. Well, there's nothing I can do about that. This is so annoying. You should just quit the company. Excuse me. I was momentarily stunned by the excessively unreasonable demand. As long as you're in this company, I'll suspend the dealings with my father's company. It's going to be trouble for the company because of you. That's harsh. You owe this company for hiring someone mediocre like you. Are you going to repay them like this? Isn't that a bit too tyrannical? You gonna say that? Think carefully about your next move. I'm not feeling well today, so I'm going home. Take care of the revisions. And don't bother coming in tomorrow unless you're ready to resign, or else I really will stop the dealings. With that, Bob vented his anger and went home. I was completely exhausted. Afterward, while focusing on the revision work, I received concerned glances from my colleagues. If I stay here, Bob might actually end up stopping the dealings, and our small construction firm would be in jeopardy. I decided to quit my job after much deliberation in the back of my mind while I was deeply engrossed in revision work. The revision work was immense, but somehow I managed to complete it overnight. Then, early in the morning, I submitted my resignation to my boss, Bill. Bill, who had always treated me kindly, was shocked and concerned, but after I explained the situation, he supported my decision. Then, I said goodbye to the members of the project group, informing them that I was leaving the company. I'm resigning effective today. I'm sorry I won't be able to see the building completed. That's such a shame. Please let Bob know I've resigned. That was just a tantrum, wasn't it? There's no need to take it seriously and resign. Did you hear that? It was loud enough for the entire floor to hear. The executives might have had their ears plugged. They can't say anything to Bob. I see, but what if his dad really stops the business dealings with us? That's a concern for sure. Yeah, that's why I have to do this. Thanks for everything. I packed my meager belongings into a box, dragged my tired body out of the office, and headed home. Then, carrying a cardboard box, I returned home and told Dorothy that I had resigned. I thought she would be angry about my quitting my job on my own, but I was worried. Alex, it's been a while since you last came home in the morning. I'm sorry for making you worry. Actually, I quit my job today. I decided without telling you, and I'm really sorry about that. Why are you apologizing? What? Actually, quitting your job was the right move. Thank you for doing that. Contrary to my expectations, instead of being angry about me quitting my job, my wife thanked me with a beaming smile, and I was completely baffled. To my surprise, she then smiled sweetly and shared some news with me. A few days later, thanks to an acquaintance of my wife, I was taking an interview at a major construction company. It turned out that this acquaintance was Bob's father. After graduating high school, my wife had worked in a restaurant and obtained her nutritionist certification 3 years ago. Just after we got married, she started her own lunch stand business. She developed a variety of popular low-calorie, low-carb yet filling menus, which became a big hit, especially among office workers prone to unhealthy eating habits. The business's performance soared. Because my wife packed these signature menus for my lunch every day, my colleagues were always envious. After focusing on delivery and setting up shop in a prime downtown location, busy executives and CEOs who didn't even have time for lunch started placing orders, and that's how she met Bob's father. The day I quit, while having breakfast after an all-nighter, my wife filled me in on many things I hadn't known. Mr. Taylor has always spoken highly of you. He believed that with your talent, you should be working on bigger projects at a major company. Wait, Bob's dad knew about me. You don't realize how valued you are in the industry, from winning a top prize in a student architectural contest to expanding your company's client base. Mr. Taylor was impressed. That's nice to hear. So, it seems like they were hoping your son could grow as a licensed architect by your side, but it looks like things didn't quite work out. Training him was more challenging than any project I've ever handled. So, it's probably for the best. You shouldn't languish at your current company when you could be challenging yourself at a bigger one. Mr. Taylor is really keen on helping you find a new job. Really? Wow. Thus, I was granted an interview at a large construction firm through Mr. Taylor's referral. Though we had never met, Mr. Taylor apologized over the phone for his son's rudeness. It remains a mystery how such an impressive father could have such a clueless son. Alex, we've been expecting you. Thank you for having me today. This interview is just a formality. Your credentials are already well respected. Essentially, today is about introducing you to our company. Is that so? Yes, we'd really like to have you join us. Thank you very much. And just like that, my re-employment was smoothly secured. I stepped up to a much larger construction company and worked with even more enthusiasm than before. As a result, I am very happy to be involved in large-scale projects that were unimaginable at my previous company, such as designing government facilities, skyscrapers, and city planning. Originally, I had obtained my architect's license while still in school and had consistently won awards at the annual architecture competitions, making me a notable figure in the industry. Consequently, it seems that both my classmates and professors were shocked and worried that I might have lost my senses when I chose my previous company. Until Bob arrived, it had been a great place to work at my own pace. Since then, I have rapidly demonstrated my true capabilities, being promoted to the head of design and entrusted with one important task after another. Every one of my projects has been highly regarded by both the industry and the general public, and my name has become increasingly well known. Before I knew it, I had achieved my childhood dream of becoming an architect. All of this was thanks to my wife, Dorothy. Meanwhile, my former company suffered a major blow. The last project I worked on turned into a disaster. Afterward, Bob refused to admit his mistakes and pushed all the revision work onto other team members, claiming all the credit for himself. However, repeated critical errors came to light, leading to the client's outrage and the project being scrapped entirely. At the same time, frustrated with Bob's attitude, all the competent project members reportedly threw in the towel. They found it absurd to let Bob monopolize the results, so halfway through the project, they dumped everything on him and all moved to a rival company. Losing of its skilled designers, the company's performance plummeted. Initially, Bob seemed to be puffing himself up, thinking, "Now it's my show." However, as a newborn architect with no real experience in meticulous planning, he was bound to fail, along with the company's ineffectual executives, who couldn't advise him. Their performance rapidly deteriorated. The relationship with our clients had collapsed, and the company's financial state was now in danger. The president of my previous company, Mr. Thompson, desperate about the situation caused by Bob, appealed to President Taylor for help. As a result, Bob was forced to resign. President Taylor decided to assist in the recovery of his former company's performance by providing work and workforce as an apology for the trouble caused by his son. After being ousted, Bob was placed under his father's strict supervision and made to work vigorously. I heard rumors that Bob was seen working on construction sites, looking exhausted and getting scolded by his boss. I felt that I had truly witnessed that one's actions will eventually come back around to you. I continue to diligently work at my dream job in architecture, hoping that my sincere efforts will bring even better returns as I strive in my new role at a new company.